Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the People on the Go Lunch and Learn webinar. My name's Melissa, and I'll be moderating the webinar today. Before we start, let's check and make sure that you can see the screen and hear me. If you can please use the questions panel on the right side of your screen to type a brief note indicating that you can hear me and see the screen, that would be great. Great, thank you, Dawn. Thank you as well, Jenny. By the way, this is the same questions panel that we'll be using for questions later. And if you're having technical difficulty, the number to call is right there on the screen. That's 1-800-263-6317. And I can also try to answer any questions about technical issues during the presentation as well. Today's webinar is leveraging mobile work to engage your employees. And I have with me Dr. P-Wen Louie and Dr. Jim Ware, who I'll be introducing in just a moment. Just a quick background about why we have these sessions, especially for those who are with us for the very first time. We have these sessions because our focus at People on the Go is productivity in the workplace. And the topics that you see on the screen are the topics that we cover. We have them available in a variety of formats, including the webinar format, just like today's session. They're offered on a monthly basis, and you can check them out on the website. We also have a membership program that makes these webinars very easy to take advantage of. And we have many resources available, like the blog, Facebook, LinkedIn groups, and you can also follow our founder, Pierre Kawand, on Twitter. So now let's dive into today's topic, leveraging mobile work to engage your employees, and I'm going to introduce our speakers. Dr. P-Wen Louie is the founder and principal of Nova Kriya Research Consulting. Nova Kriya helps busy HR leaders and executives increase employee engagement and improve business results. With Nova Kriya's end-to-end employee survey solution, decision makers get valid employee feedback, in-depth analysis, and organized survey results, enabling them to see subgroups at a glance, spot trends, and quickly identify areas of strength. Dr. Jim Ware is the executive director of the Future of Work Unlimited, a research and advisory firm with a single mission, bringing the future to work. They offer guidance in creating compelling pictures of the future and designing pathways for getting there. The Future of Work brings decades of experience in strategic thinking, business case analysis, and change leadership to organizations seeking to make a difference for customers, employees, shareholders, and the community at large. And so now I'm going to turn it over to our presenters, and this transition will just take a moment.
While we're waiting, Melissa, this is Jim Ware. I'll just say thank you for inviting us to participate, and we're looking forward to an interesting conversation.
Thank you very much, Jim. Just having one issue here. Let me just check this really fast. Okay, this should work now.
Right. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, P-Wen. Thank you so much.
All right. Can everyone see my screen here?
I can see it, P-Wen. It's looking good.
Yes, and okay. I can see it too.
Great. All right. Thank you, Melissa. And thank you everybody for joining our webinar today. And just want to give you some orientation on how we're going to spend our time together. We will start with talking a little bit about the current trends in the workplace to set the context for our conversation today. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about our survey background and why we want to conduct this study. And then obviously share some key findings with you. And finally, we'll wrap up by sharing some of the tips and observations for engaging your mobile workers. Jim?
Oh, thanks, P-Wen. I just want to start with a very broad overview. It's not particular news, I think, to anyone that we're living in an age of mobility where people, almost everybody can work anywhere, anytime. In fact, one research study a year ago found that there are over 1 billion people worldwide who are fully capable of working outside a corporate office on a regular basis. That doesn't mean they are. That doesn't mean they are. And as anyone who's paying attention to the news these days knows, there's been quite a bit of commentary and discussion over the last 2 weeks about the CEO of Yahoo, Marissa Mayer, and her decision to ask all Yahoo employees to come back into the office, and as some people have said, take them back to the 20th century. There's lots of commentary on that subject. We're not here to deal with it directly today. And we don't want to cast aspersions or make judgments about right or wrong. It's a very complex subject. But we do want to provide all of you with some data that we hope Marissa Mayer would find interesting as well, in terms of some of the connections between mobility, people working in different places at different times, and their engagement and productivity with their employer organization. So with that, P-Wen, why don't you dig into the survey data?
Sure. Before we dig into the data, I also want to mention a little bit about Gen Y, because more and more Gen Y people are entering the workforce. And if you have Gen Y workers in your company, you probably know that they value flexibility and work mobility, as well as the social media freedom. In fact, a recent Cisco study found that 33% of Gen Y workers would prioritize social media freedom and work mobility over their salaries in accepting a job. So those are the trends that are affecting our workforce these days. And our survey results will cast more light into how you can engage your mobile workforce. So let's take a look at this survey background. We were really interested in finding out what's the current state of mobile work. So we took an integrated survey approach. In the past, the kind of surveys that study mobile workers is either looking at their hardware needs or from a management standpoint, looking at how to manage your virtual workforce. So in this study, this is the first ever study that we integrate both, looking at the technology needs of mobile workers, as well as the factors that could impact their engagement. We collected the data between June and July of 2012, just last year, and we received more than 200 responses. The participants come from different company sizes as well as locations. We have 38% working for small companies that has fewer than 50 employees or less, and we have 30% who are in the big companies of 5,000 employees or more. In terms of location, a majority of them are in North America, and we have 21% in Europe. Again, most of the people from Europe seem to be coming from UK. So these are the two areas that are well represented. And our survey participants also, we also have a good cross-section of participants in different roles. As you see, 35% are in senior management role, 25% as individual contributor, 21% are consultants or self-employed, and 17% are managers. So our survey data is pretty well represented in terms of different roles as well as company sizes. So let's take a look at a poll right now. And we're just curious to find out from you, what do you think about how often do you work outside of your office? And Melissa? So please help us take this poll, and we'll compare your results to our results.
We'll just wait a few more moments for the poll. Thank you everyone for participating. We'll go ahead and close it now.
Well, P-Wen, we've got a pretty mobile group here.
And yeah, 48% more than twice a week. That's almost half. And only 6% never work outside of their office.
Yeah.
That's really great.
One of the things I think it's worth remembering when we have discussions about mobility and workplace flexibility is that for many people, senior executives in particular, they think of it as all or nothing. They kind of assume that people are either in the office all the time or they're not in the office any of the time. And I think clearly we see a wide distribution here, and that's really what I experience most commonly over and over again. It's not all or nothing.
Yeah, and data matches our survey data as well. As you can see, you know, about 60% of the people are internally mobile. Even though they go to the office, they're still going to different places, going to a meeting in different conference rooms and such. And the rest of the people here, we call them externally mobile. They either work outside of their office or home office or at their client's office. Jim, do you have anything to add to this observations?
P1, I think I made the point I really wanted to make, that there's a variety of forms of mobility. As I think you just suggested, there are people who are mobile inside an office building quite frequently over the course of a day. They're in one conference room and then another conference room and then in a workstation and then in a lounge and so on. And in some ways, that's not all that different from people who are outside the office. And then there's this third kind of mobility or remote work, which is where people are in different corporate offices but are interacting with each other remotely, even though they may both be in the office, they may be in different cities or even different countries.
Right. Yep. So we also found that work is increasingly collaborative, and thanks to the internet and a lot of mobile devices. In fact, 55% of the work are collaborative. Only 45% of the work is actually individual work at your desk, which is still very important, as you need individual time or solo time to do some thinking or just writing. So you do need that kind of quiet time. But increasingly, we are working with people across locations, across offices, and we collaborate on the phone as well as online, like use GoToMeeting or webinars like what we're doing now. So the internet really has enabled a lot of collaboration and breaks down the barriers between locations and time zone even.
Yeah. P-Wen, I'm fond of saying in my role as a workplace futurist that I think the two things we know most confidently about the changing nature of work and the future of work are, one, that it will be more distributed and more remote, and two, that it will be more collaborative. And it's only through technologies like this that we can achieve both.
Right. Yeah, there is a term that is increasingly being used. It's called the palette of place. Basically, this is the idea that you want to enable your workers to select the kind of places where they can work that is most effective to them in terms of collaboration. So they can easily want to go to a conference room or meet up in a cafe or even meet up at the lounge in the airport if they will happen to be flying in together at meeting at the O'Hare airport, for example, and have done that before. So yeah,
as long as there isn't a foot of snow on.
yes, which is I think that's what's happening right now in Ohio.
In fact, though, P-Wen, I'm sorry to jump in again, but it's worth pointing out there was a story in the paper this morning about the snowstorm that hit the East Coast yesterday. And a number of government agencies were semi-shut down, but their people were working from home. They were just as productive. One of the senior executives, agency officers, made that comment.
Right, and that's the beauty of having remote work. So let's take a look at some of the communication methods that people use when they and how to get their work done. So by far, email is still the most used communication method, although we all know that we get overwhelmed by the number of emails we receive every day. But it seems to be the default method. Over 90% of the people in large companies and mid-sized companies use emails to communicate with their workers. And instant messaging also, instant messaging smartphone as well as landline phones are used a lot of the times in the large companies. The large companies are companies that have more than 5,000 employees. The very small companies are companies that have 50 employees, a few or less. So it's interesting to see that for mid-sized companies, 61% of them are still using face-to-face meetings. And it is important to still have the personal touch, the in-person touch. But it seems that in a mid-sized company, that seems to work pretty frequently and pretty well. Whereas in large companies as well as smaller companies, they tend to use other ways to communicate or collaborate with their coworkers. What is interesting to note is for social networking tools, even with all the buzz that we hear lately, it is still no comparison to emails. Only 30%, about 30% of the large companies use social networking tools such as YAML or Salesforce Chatter. And same thing with the small companies. And also for web-based collaboration applications, it's only 28% of the people in large companies use that frequently. So it could be cost as a factor. What do you think, Jim?
I don't know. I really find it quite surprising. Now, I think we know that the usage of the more public social media tools like Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn is much higher, but I think people tend to think of that as a more individual tool rather than an in-company tool. And that's really, we were focusing, I think, on on business related communication, on internal organizational communication. But it is striking to me that the social media tools are still used by less than a third of the workforce overall.
Right, yeah. But we what we didn't present on this slide is things like overnights, FedEx, and postage, USPS delivery. So those are actually dying a very slow death. And as you know from the news, the USPS is actually struggling to revamp their organization because not many people are using them anymore. So we only have perhaps less than 5% of the people still using FedEx or USPS delivery. So, and fax is in fact not many people are using that as well. So these are the leading communication methods, and probably not surprising either. So we would like to take another poll now. So now that we have finished talking about the technology part and how people are communicating with each other, we want to hear from you. What do you think about the benefits and cost of telecommuting? Melissa?
I don't want to bias the results, but given what people told us they were doing in terms of working mobily and flexibly, I'll be surprised if this is if we get different results from this question. But it's an important one.
Yeah.
I guess we know how Marissa Meyer would answer that question.
Well,
Sorry, I can't resist. I can't resist.
It's a hot topic.
Well, it's a complex one too. There really are
You're
very
right.
strong arguments on both sides, and I think those of us who are not, privy to the insides at Yahoo need to be careful about broad-based criticisms.
Wow, strongly agree. 53%.
Yeah.
Agree is 33. So we have 86% agreement.
Positive and only 1% negative.
Right.
So again, I think that people on this call are interested in this topic, PWen, and again, not surprising, but it's important because it may feel right, but for organizations, it has to be right from a financial sense and an engagement sense as well as a making people happy sense.
Yes, definitely. So your answer is actually matching quite nicely with our survey results. And we look at employee engagement and productivity. So these are some of the questions. These are the questions that we ask our participants. When you telecommute or work away from your office at least 2 days a week, how are the following impacted? You will see that in terms of work-life balance and productivity, about 3/4 of the participants say it increases significantly or somewhat. So they're really positive here. Even for career advancement opportunity, we're probably a little bit surprised to see that 65% actually say no impact whatsoever. So that's good news for people who are thinking about working remotely. And the other thing, in terms of getting the latest news and development at their organization, as well as the ability to establish professional and social networks within their organization, it's about 50%, about half of the participants say there's no impact. So this slide is really telling us that the benefits of telecommuting actually outweighs its cost.
Yeah. PWen, let me tell a quick story if you don't mind my jumping in.
Sure,
Uh,
no.
I worked with a health insurance company several years ago, and we helped them establish a work from home program where today about a third of their workforce is spending 2 to 3 days a week working from home, not full time by any means. Everybody's in the office a couple times a week. But one of the things we did as we got started was we met regularly with the people who were starting to work from home because we wanted to know what was working and what wasn't working and what we had to fix to provide them with the right kind of support. One of the questions we asked was, do you feel like you're losing touch with the company or with your fellow employees, with your peers, with your department members? And the most surprising thing was that several people said they actually felt closer to their colleagues while they were working from home than they did in the office. And that's kind of strange. And we said, well, why is that? One of the women said, well, when I'm in the office and I walk down the hall and I see people, they're either hard at work on the keyboard or they're on the telephone, and I don't want to interrupt them. When I can't see them from when they're at home or I'm at home, I pick up the phone and call them, or I send an instant message, and if they're available, they respond right away. So I just thought it was not expected, quite frankly. But again, people teach themselves how to use these tools to get done what they want to get done or what they feel need to get done.
Yes, yes. And, we do need social interaction, and there are all the technologies are available to us now to get in touch with people or pick up the phone and call. And I'm guilty of just sending emails even for a short answer of yes or no. But if you were to work in an office environment, it's actually better to walk over to people's cubicle and say hi and talk a little bit. That might be easier. But yes, even though when you work remotely, there are ways for you to get connected with your coworkers and your colleagues. We were also interested in finding out what are some of the organization's barriers that might prevent people from working from home. And this is what we found. There's a theme, quite a few people talk about not having management trust when they work from home or work remotely. For example, this is what one of the participants said. There's a view that if you are not in the office, you are not working. And then another person said, management attitude is still management by time. So those are related to the company culture as well as the sense of trust that the management does not have in employees working from home.
Well, and PWen, I don't want to overdo the Marissa Meyer story, but one of her comments when this first became public was she said, I don't know what people are doing and I don't know where they are. And so she did not have trust in what was going on. I think the problem is a management system problem more than it is a people goofing off problem. But there is that fundamental skepticism, I guess, still in many, particularly traditional and older managers.
Yeah, it is a performance issue, right? You have to hold employees accountable, and you need to have that kind of practices and system in place to have that happen. The
Right.
second trend is about IT connections. And probably many of you have experienced that as well. If you want to retrieve files from your company network, sometimes slow connection can be a barrier and a source of frustration. For example, one of the participants said instant retrieval of information is difficult, especially when network is slow. Um, the other one to say computer connectivity. So having a smooth running IT connection is going to be helpful for people who work from home or remotely. And then the third trend that I see is a lack of social interactions. Again, if you do work from home or if you even work in a cafe, uh, you may miss out on some of the bonding that goes on with your peers. Um, Another person said it can be difficult to establish smooth working relationships with my coworkers. And then someone also said, not being available for face-to-face meetings with staff regarding sensitive issues. So there are times where working in the office and face-to-face with your colleagues will work better. But so these are some of the barriers that people write in when we ask them that question. We were also very interested in finding out what are some of their personal concerns for working from home or working remotely. Do I hear an awe from the audience? I love this. um, Actually, some of the themes here sort of corresponds to the organizational barrier. For example, someone say out of sight, out of mind. Right? People tend to not remember to include you as much as if they see you every day. And isolation, the sense of isolation, the loss of social and impromptu interactions. And then the other one actually is the flip side of a lot of people. Some people may think that if you work remotely or working from home, you may be goofing off. And the Jim, or sorry, there's like a background noise that is going on.
I'm not hearing it. I hope it's not serious.
Yeah, okay. I think it's gone now. Sorry about that. There is also a lack of work-life boundaries. For example, work becomes working too much. Coworkers think I'm goofing off, missing some materials, and constant emails that need to be attended to even on weekends. And sometimes people just don't know how to set the boundaries if they work remotely. And finally, a lack of motivation. This one, some people actually say loss of motivation, or would like to be more efficient while working at home and other locations. So, you know, maybe from time to time, some of us also experience that. You work from home or you work remotely. You think about, I have to do laundry now, and that can be a distraction. So these are some of the personal concerns for working remotely. We were also interested in finding out how would their job satisfaction be impacted if they could design how they would get their work done? And the answer is actually a very positive one, and no surprise here. 38% of them say increase significantly, and 30% say increase somewhat. So when people feel like they have some control over how they do their work and where they can get their work done, the job satisfaction will increase. And in this age where work is collaborative and you're enabled by the internet, work is really what you accomplish and what you get done rather than where you get it done.
Pew, and I would just add very quickly, I think I just want to underscore what you said a moment ago, when people feel like they're in control. That to me is the core idea. And that's a lot of what workplace flexibility is about.
Right.
Individuals making choices based on their understanding of what's expected of them and what they need to do, making their choices about where, when, and how to get the work done in the context of their own life, which no one else really knows as well as they do.
Yep, yep, yep. And the good thing is we do have the kind of technologies and tools that facilitates this kind of flexibility. So with that, and I want to also know, we also want to know, are remote workers just as engaged as office-bound workers? I think this is a question many people have in mind. So we set out to ask some questions that are related to employee engagement. So this is a pretty heavy duty slide, I understand, but I want to point out that over here, these are the items that are related to employee engagement, in that these are the drivers of employee engagement. When you do impactful and meaningful work, you have the tools and resources to do your job well. You have the opportunities to learn new skills. How you know how your performance is measured. You have opportunities for career advancement, and that your manager is supportive of your career inspirations. So just want to call out this column here where, so I cut it by where they do work. And if you look at people who work outside of their office most of the time, the uh, their results are consistently higher than the total, which is the total survey sample that we have. So this slide suggests to me that, to us, that people who actually work remotely they do have the resources and the factors that can engage them, and they seem to be doing better compared to the counterparts who work in their office or cubicle most of the time. So then finally, one of the key things that we use to measure employee engagement is how likely are you to recommend your companies to your friends and family. So we see that people who are working remotely or on the go, those who work outside of their office at their client sites or home offices, 66% say they are extremely likely or very likely to recommend their company as a great place to work. Whereas those people who mainly work in their office or within the company's facility, 62% of them say they are extremely likely or very likely. So the differences may not be significant enough, but the trend is there, especially if you also look at somewhat likely. The bars is much longer here compared to here. So we feel pretty positive that working remotely actually can help employee engagement rather than detract from it. Jim, you have any observations on this?
Again, just another quick story. That same insurance company I mentioned earlier, where people were feeling more connected to each other when they're working remotely. We also discovered that several people commented that their neighbors saw them working at home in the middle of the week and said, "What's going on? Did you lose your job?" And they said, "No, my company lets me work from home." And one guy said the response from his neighbor was, "Gee, that sounds like a really neat place to work. Could are you looking for people?" So they actually developed little recruiting brochures and gave them to all the people who worked at home so they could hand them out to their neighbors. They were hiring, and they were looking for good people.
Great.
So
yeah, that's a great story.
Something people don't think about too often.
Yeah, yeah. So and the next slide, we're going to share some tips with you in terms of how to engage your mobile workers. First thing is really to communicate clearly, but you don't want to micromanage your people. Jim?
No, I was just going to say, this is a slide we could spend an entire hour on this slide alone. We have to go through it fairly quickly. But yes, it's set parameters, set expectations for employees, and let them know how their performance will be measured. I'm actually quite convinced that one of the real benefits and the reasons we get higher productivity and higher level of engagement with remote workers is that the remoteness, or the working from home or working outside the office, forces the individual and the manager to get very explicit and clear about what performance is expected. And when people know what's expected of them, they tend to do it better and more often.
Right, right. And sometimes managers have the tendency of over communicate when their people is working remotely, but actually doing so can interrupt their flow. So you want to set clear expectations, and you want to set probably a regular check-in time, but try not to over manage or micromanage your employees who are working remotely. And that brings us to the third point. You orchestrate your online meetings very carefully and hold them regularly, because what happens is when you have people who work remotely, you still need to build that trust, that sense of trust that is so important in engaging your employees and having this kind of relationship where you actually don't see them in the office. You can have people work remotely, but from time to time, you need to have people either meet online together or even have a face-to-face meeting in your office to rebuild the trust again. Because when people go away and do work in their home or somewhere else, the trust is like your money, right? The kind of currency that you have. Whenever they go away and work on their individual work in a different location in virtual manner, you're depleting the trust from your quote unquote bank. But when you get people together, have some kind of social activities or meeting, you're building trust. So you're banking in more trust, putting more trust into your bank. And you want to take full advantage of collaborative technologies. And a lot of the online technologies can have video conference. Now you can actually see people's faces in addition to hearing their voice. Pay as much attention to social topics as you do to work activities. So again, this is related to the trust issue where you don't want to just talk about work, but also understanding what's going on in their life perhaps, and have some check-in.
Again, P-Wen, it's the kind of thing that often happens very casually and informally throughout a workday in an office. People see each other in the hallway, or someone has a birthday card sitting on their desk, and it's easy for coworkers and managers to stay in touch with each other. But when you're remote, it takes a little more work, and I think that's why we talk about orchestrating the meetings a little more formally. You can't be quite as casual about the agenda and the conversation flow when you're dealing with remote workers as you can when your people are walking down the hall or seeing each other in the parking lot or whatever. So it's just, remember, these are human beings. They have things going on in their lives, and it helps people to connect with each other, to know what's going on.
Right. And finally, you want to give your employees the autonomy to decide how to get their work done. So this is related to the first bullet point of not micromanaging, and really giving them the autonomy and the flexibility of how to get their work done. If you know that you selected your employees very well, and you're confident that they have the talent to do the work well, then you should just let them have the freedom to decide how to do their work, to best do their work. And so that's all we have now, Melissa.
Great. Thank you so much, P-Wen and Jim. We're going to transition back to my slides in just a moment, and then we're going to get into the Q&A portion. So we're going to transition here. And again, this is the contact information for P-Wen and Jim if you'd like to get in touch with them. And you will also be receiving, you already received these slides, so you have this that information there. And then you're also going to be receiving a recording of the webinar today.
And Melissa, we should add, I think if anybody is interested in seeing the executive summary report on the survey data in more detail, we'd be glad to share that with them as well.
That's wonderful too. We had a lot of questions, a lot of very particular questions come up, so I'm sure that would be very helpful for people. Just so before we get into the Q&A, I have a few reminders. For those who joined us later in the session, please feel free to visit our blog and join our Facebook and LinkedIn groups to stay updated on future events like this one. Right now, we're hosting a leadership survey, and I'm going to share the link that's listed on the bottom with the group here. And as you can see on this slide, we have a lot of prizes for taking this leadership survey, whether it's a Kindle, some books, a complimentary membership to our workshops, a $1,250 value for the leadership program that's coming up. So some really amazing prizes, and the The survey only takes about 10 to 15 minutes. And then we're also offering for today only a free seat in the upcoming project management workshop just for filling out the survey. And we'll send you a login link either this Friday or Monday. And that session is coming up on April 24th and May 1st. It's a two-part session. I'm going to share the survey link with you here. And then we also have some special offers that we're running now. We have the Resolving Conflicts Productively workshop that starts tomorrow. You get quite a deal for this one, $19.95. And then we have Creativity and Innovation coming up at the end of this month as well. And so now I invite you to please submit your questions into the questions panel. We've gone a little bit over today, but if you could please just hang on with us here, we'll get into this really exciting part, which is answering your questions. We already had some questions come up, so I'm going to go ahead and start with this first one here. So P-Wen and Jim, how do you feel, does working at home, you addressed this a little bit, but does working at home have a negative effect on innovation?
That's the big Yahoo question, isn't it?
Right, isn't it?
I think that I don't have a lot of data at hand. I don't think it has a deep impact. There is some belief, and it's more a belief, I think, than evidence-driven data, that face-to-face meetings can be more spontaneous and generate more brainstorming. But there's another side to that as well. I mean, brainstorming has been overrated, quite frankly. It's a long-term myth. And frankly, when people are working from home and collaborating remotely, whether it's a session like this or people using a shared white screen, there's actually a little more anonymity than when you're sitting around a table. And it may be easier for people to bring up new ideas or unexpected or unpopular ideas. So I think the jury's out on that one. And I hope I hope this whole kerfuffle will stimulate some new research on that question.
Yeah, I think there are ways where you can actually orchestrate, so to speak, where you can actually have people come together and innovate together. So working from home, and you can still collaborate online. And like Jim said, you have all this kind of whiteboard or where you can actually share ideas. I don't think it's going to be a big impact. But that said, when you can bring people into a face-to-face meeting and collaborate that way, it's not so much about brainstorming ideas, but it's actually building up your social capital in building trust within the team that can help as well.
Yeah, let me just add one thing I forgot to mention. There are some pretty interesting techniques for surveying people, collecting the results, and then feeding it back to people again and asking people to go through a process of converging on something without knowing who else is saying the same thing or saying the opposite thing. So it's not always real-time collaboration. There's also sequential surveys and methods for really getting more objective or more pure ideas from people, I think, than what you would get with people sitting around in a room, where social factors can really have an impact. If the boss is sitting there, I've been in meetings where people I found out after the fact were not being open at all because their boss was sitting in the back of the room. And or someone is known for a particular point of view or whatever, and that affects the way people react to them, even on different subjects.
Right.
Here's another question that came up in a few different forms. Does working at home hamper career opportunities? You're not in the office. Are you missing out on different advancement opportunities?
Well, our survey data actually say it has not a big impact, because I think 65% of them say there's no impact on their career advancement opportunities. Career advancement opportunity, if I personally feel like probably is not, but if you are thinking, if you can be connected with your colleagues, and if you always contribute above and beyond, and if you are bringing in new ideas that have impact on your business or your company performance, I think that can help as well. The other part of career advancement is people do need to speak up, because if you are just being passive and sit in your home and do great work and people don't know about that, then your career advancement opportunity might be impacted. So it's a two-part equation, right? So you do great work and you want to talk about it and you want people to know it, then you can actually advocate for your own career advancement.
Again, this is a fear that a lot of people do express, P-Wen, as you know.
Right.
But I think the people who have the most to worry about there are those who are working at home 4 or 5 days a week, where they're almost not in the office at all. I don't think there's any risk at all for someone who just happens to be out of the office 2 or 3 days a week. I mean, think of how many people whose jobs require travel, and they're gone, often a week at a time, but not all the time by any means. And again, I think you're right. People do have to learn to speak up and take care of themselves and make sure they are being recognized. But that I don't think that's just a function of being out of the office frequently.
Right.
Right. Very good. Very good. Someone had asked about third spaces, co-working spaces. So you're not at the office, but you're not exactly at home. How do you feel about people who are choosing to work in these types of spaces, or companies that are utilizing these types of third spaces to have kind of more of that flex work experience?
Yeah, this is a great question, because this is a trend now. There are more and more co-working spaces popping up all over the country. And in fact, this month, Fast Company has an article about big giant companies, putting people side by side in co-working spaces so that they can actually collaborate and innovate together. This is bringing in diverse opinions, because by locating their employees in a co-working space next to another, even competitors, they can actually have some fruitful discussion, which is a very interesting trend. So I think it helps facilitate some conversations and maybe get some new ideas that you might not think about if you were to be working remotely in your home office or on just by yourself. So I think it can help.
Well, I'll add a couple things, P-Wen. First, it is one of the most rapidly growing industry sectors that I'm aware of right now over the last 5 or 6 years. I started doing research on third places about 10 years ago, and I'm not tracking it as closely now as I was, but the initial interest, at least, has been more in small businesses than in larger. There has been a fear on the part of large employees about the security issues, and sitting next to, if you're working for Apple, sitting next to someone who works at Google isn't, or Microsoft, isn't necessarily what your boss wants you to do. But I think those issues are overblown. But there's also the reality that for a lot of people, being around other people is kind of a motivating factor. Other people who are also hard at work, and then there are the resources, whether it's internet connection or meeting rooms, or a number of other things.
Free coffee.
Free coffee. That's right. All of those, and shorter commutes. There are some large organizations that have actually established small satellite offices in the suburbs, so that a number of their employees, they're all working for the same company, but they don't have to come all the way into Center City every day. They may have a meeting with colleagues or peers, 2 miles from their home instead of 20 miles. So right. There are a lot. I think it's going to be an increasingly important part of the workplace landscape. Larger organizations are really just beginning to make use of them, but I think we're going to see more and more of that in the future.
Great. It looks like we have time for one more question. This last one was about collaboration technologies. What do you think are the most important technologies and platforms to use when your employees are working at home? Do you also think that video conferencing will have more of an impact moving forward? Maybe it already is, really.
Well, I'll jump in, P-Wen. First, on the video conferencing, yes, I do think it's going to have more impact. If you think about it, we as individuals are getting more and more used to video, online video. YouTube is so incredible. Now that's asynchronous. That's watching someone else doing something. It's not an interactive video conference, but we're getting more comfortable with it. The quality is getting much better. Citrix Online, which produces GoToWebinar, has a very good high definition video capability embedded in their parallel GoToMeeting product, and it really is almost like being there. In fact, Citrix, who's been a client of mine, describes video conferences as in-person meetings. No, as face-to-face meetings. I'm sorry, as face-to-face meetings, because they are equivalent to that. And I have quite literally done work for people who and with people for extended periods of time who have never met face to face. I'm not saying that's my preference, but it can work. So one other quick story, and I know we're short on time, but I several years ago was participating in a project based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I live in Northern California, and I traveled there quite frequently. But there was one occasion when there was a large meeting being held for the project, and I wasn't able to be there physically. So but I was able to participate in real time, and it was an audio conference for a good part of the call. However, one of the people in the room, where there were 20 people, linked up with me on using a video cam, turned his laptop around so I was looking in the same direction he was, so I could see the other people in the room. And it surprised me how much more focused I got on the conversation when I could see, even though it was a relatively small screen, I could see people's gestures, I could see their faces. If somebody got up and was writing on a flip chart, I knew who it was, I could see it. And it was a 3-hour meeting, and quite frankly, I never would have lasted a 3-hour audio meeting. So I do think video conferencing is a terribly underrated technology. We're all used to audio conferences like we're having right here, and it's sufficient for a good deal, but there is significantly more information communicated when you can see someone's posture, their body language, their facial expressions, their gestures. I really think it makes a huge difference. I think we're going to see it increasingly in use. We have very inexpensive options like Skype. More and more people who are distributed families are using them. Grandparents seeing their grandchildren, spouses in the military staying connected with each other that way. As that becomes more widespread, we may not be at the tipping point yet, but I don't think we're too far away from it, frankly.
Right. That's a really great point, Jim, because with video conferencing, it seems like you're getting all the benefits of face-to-face work time, but then you still, get the benefits of being at home and being more productive too. So it's interesting how technology can really enable, progress in that area.
The saving of time, the saving of greenhouse gases I think is underrated too, and we're going to be paying more and more attention to those trade-offs. Yes, face-to-face, in-person meetings are powerful, but at what cost, and how often are they necessary? I mean, I think we have to learn to ask that question.
Exactly. Well, that's a good place to leave off today. I just want to thank everyone so much for sticking around for the Q&A. Again, thank you, Jim and P-Wen, so much. That was an excellent presentation. Everyone, you'll be receiving a recording of this session. And again, I invite you to please fill out that leadership survey. We would really appreciate it. There's a lot of prizes in store and that free workshop, as I mentioned. When you leave the webinar today, if you could please fill out the quick feedback form. That's also very helpful to us moving forward when we create these webinars. So I'm going to be ending the session now, and thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Melissa.
Thank you guys so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.